Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. We're going to jump right in today because we are unpacking one of the most incredible narratives in history, the legendary story of the Ashab al Kahf, better known as the people of the cave. Now, on the surface, sure, this looks like an ancient story of faith and survival, but when you really start breaking down the source material, it transforms into this astonishing account of biology, physics, and mathematical precision. Today we're going to explore exactly how a group of ordinary youths managed to survive centuries hidden away inside a mountain.
Think about it. It is literally the ultimate biological paradox. Could a human body actually survive 300 years of uninterrupted sleep? If you or I were to just lie down and not move for a few decades, let alone 3 whole centuries, basic science tells us our bodies would completely break down. And yet, the sources we're looking at today present this mind-bending medical and physical mystery, where the laws of nature were perfectly paused. But to understand how they pulled off this biological masterclass, we first need to understand what drove them into the dark in the first place.
So let's look at Section 1, Escaping the Idol King and the Journey to the Cave.
The sequence of events here escalated incredibly fast. Our sources describe a really prosperous city ruled by a cruel pagan king named Dakianis, and he was essentially forcing his people to worship stone and wood idols under the threat of death. But a small group of young men, some accounts even say they worked right there in the king's own palace, they absolutely refused. When the king found out, he threatened them with execution and gave them a very short window to reconsider. We're talking a matter of hours here. And in those hours, they made a massive decision. They walked away from their comfortable lives, their homes, their families. Over the next few days, they fled the city and slipped into a mountain cave, completely cutting themselves off from society. And honestly, I love this detail. They weren't entirely alone. Their faithful dog, Kutamir, followed right behind them to guard the entrance.
Picture this moment, right before they fell asleep, standing in the cool, uncertain darkness of that cave. They didn't ask for a palace. They didn't ask for an army to fight the king or a hidden stash of gold. They simply prayed, saying, "Our Lord, grant us mercy from yourself and prepare for us from our affair right guidance." They were just terrified youths putting their absolute trust in something way bigger than themselves. And the response they got? Well, it completely defied the laws of time itself.
Which brings us to Section 2, a biological masterclass, and surviving a 3-century sleep.
Now this is where things get really fascinating. The very first biological system addressed in the source text, it wasn't their breathing, it wasn't their hearts. It was actually their ears. The text explicitly says, "So we struck over their ears in the cave for many years." Why start with the ears? Because your ears are essentially your brain's ultimate surveillance system. Even when your eyes are closed and you are dead asleep, your ears never truly shut down.
Modern science actually has a name for this. It's called the Reticular Activating System, or the RAS. You can think of it as the brain's internal alarm clock. It's constantly monitoring your environment for danger, movement, or sound. If a rock fell in that cave, or the wind howled outside, or an animal brushed past, the RAS would instantly jolt their consciousness back awake. So to pull off a centuries-long sleep, that input channel literally had to be removed. By sealing off their hearing, the entire gateway to wakefulness was completely shut down. But okay, that's just the neurological side. What about the physical body? Listen, if a human stays completely still for even 24 hours, the sheer weight of their own bones starts crushing the blood vessels against their skin. A lack of blood flow means a lack of oxygen, which very rapidly leads to bed sores and tissue death. The flesh literally begins to rot away. So how on earth did they survive for over 300 years? The divine solution detailed in the text is that they were continuously turned to the right and to the left. It was essentially an automated 390-year physical therapy session perfectly designed to ensure steady blood flow and keep their bodies entirely whole. And then you have the cave environment itself, which the sources describe as what is basically a perfectly calibrated solar HVAC system. Seriously, if they were stuck in direct sunlight, they'd severely dehydrate and literally bake like raisins. But if they were in total pitch-black darkness, they'd lack vitamin D, their bones would get incredibly brittle, and that cave would quickly turn into a damp, moldy tomb. Instead, the cave's opening was situated perfectly so the sun inclined away at sunrise and missed them entirely at sunset. They got just enough indirect UV rays to kill off any bacteria and keep the air circulating. It was a flawless, solar-powered biodome.
So here's the real kicker. If you were just some random passerby who happened to stumble into this cave, you wouldn't see some peaceful fairy tale of sleeping beauties. No way. You would see something deeply terrifying. You'd be staring at the supernatural, self-rotating biological anomaly with unblinking eyes, guarded by a dog sitting completely motionless at the entrance. It would defy every single law of nature you know. And just as the source notes, you wouldn't stick around to investigate. You would turn around and run in absolute terror.
All right, let's move into section 3, waking up to the future and the math of the sleep.
So eventually they wake up, they stretch, blink a few times, and they're genuinely asking each other, hey, how long were we out? One guy guesses a day, another thinks maybe just part of a day. But the mathematical reality of their sleep was exactly 309 lunar years. And what is so brilliant about that specific number is the sheer precision of it. 309 lunar years flawlessly equals exactly 300 solar years. They went to sleep in one era and completely bypassed 3 centuries.
Naturally, the very first thing they realized upon waking up was that they were starving, so they send one of the youths sneaking down the mountain to buy some food, warning him to be incredibly careful so the king's men wouldn't spot him. But when he actually walks into the city, the buildings are different. The people are dressed entirely differently, and when he tries to pay for his food with the silver coins from his pocket, we get this incredibly cinematic moment. The shopkeeper just stares at the money. To the youth, he literally earned that silver yesterday, but to the shopkeeper, it would be like someone trying to buy a coffee today using a coin from the Revolutionary War. That one simple transaction triggered a massive citywide revelation.
Let's look at Section 4, the real-world cave, and tracing their footsteps today.
You might be wondering, where exactly did this happen? Well, there's actually an ongoing geographical mystery regarding the exact location of this cave. We have several heavily debated contender locations, mostly situated in modern-day Turkey. There are sites in Ephesus, Lysae, Afshin, and probably most notably, a cave situated just north of Tarsus in the Mersin province. In fact, that specific site in Tarsus is so highly revered that back in 1873, an Ottoman sultan named Abdulaziz actually commissioned a mosque to be built right next to the cave. The physical footprint of this event has genuinely left a lasting mark on world geography.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Lessons in Faith and Trust, or the ultimate trust fall. The sources highlight a few really core takeaways for us to pull from all this. First off, faith isn't just an adult thing. These were young people who were honored for their immense conviction. Second, leaving their city wasn't an act of cowardice because running toward God is very different from just running away. Third, sincere acts of trust are never ever wasted. When they fell asleep, they probably assumed their story was completely over. But in reality, it had barely even begun. By the time they woke up, that cruel king was long dead, and the new society in that city was actively debating what happens after death and whether the soul actually survives. These youths woke up to become a living, breathing masterclass for an entire generation.
You know that classic trust fall exercise? The one where you stand opposite a partner, make your body completely stiff, fall backward into the unknown, and just totally trust that you're going to be caught. That is exactly what the people of the cave did. They left the safety of literally everything they knew, fell backward into the dark void of a mountain cave, and fully trusted that they'd be caught. And they absolutely were caught, protected by this meticulously designed, unbelievable system of biology, physics, and divine care.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. These young men hit pause on their lives and woke up to a world vastly different, a world that desperately needed their exact story at that exact moment in time. If the universe hit pause on you today, what kind of world would you want to wake up to centuries from now? And what kind of legacy of trust and conviction would you want to leave behind? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next one.